Hi, I'm Catherine Owen, geography teacher and 2025 to 26 president of the Geographical Association. You're listening to the Coffee and Geography podcast. Grab yourself a brew and enjoy the listen.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Coffee and Geography podcast with the season-long special of Climate Ambassadors. So I hope you really enjoyed the kind of like little diversion last week where we spoke to Alistair Hamill about his wonderful scheme in Northern Ireland. Please do check that out if you haven't. But I'm kind of like back to quote unquote regular programming with yet again someone in my region, and that's Amelia Grigg. How are you doing, Amelia?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, yes. We were talking about before we started recording about the sun's out and it's quite nice. And like I said, I've just been completely taken back by how it seems that it suddenly gets really light, really late, even though we know it's gradual. So I don't know. Is it throwing your work schedule off? Because like for me, it's like I'm suddenly realizing it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's still bright outside. I'm like, oh, I've got to get home.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's been lovely actually. It's made a real difference to the days, doesn't it? When you can actually go for a walk after work and it's not pitch black outside, or you can get up a bit
Oh
earlier
goodness.
because the sun's already beaming in your window. Not that I do that all
Yep.
the time, but
Well, that's it. Yeah, I mean the window that's right. For the reason why I tend to be glowing when we do video recordings, folks, is because I'm right in front of the window which faces east. So if I'm doing, you'll know the time of day I'm recording this because if I'm like really glowing, then you'll know I'm recording it in the morning. So because the sun's like just going around that way to the south, and then if in the afternoon I don't look like I'm as pale as a ghost. So to introduce Amelia then is Amelia is sustainability officer by day for a local authority, currently focusing on tree planting projects and climate education for both schools and the staff at the council. She studied biology at university where she failed at growing tomatoes with hydroponics, but somewhat succeeded at researching the effects of tree planting schemes in the tropics. See if we can talk about that later. Amelia spent a couple of years working in educational outreach to increase the number of students participating in higher education with underrepresented backgrounds. So, Amelia, were you also, did we talk about this before? Were you also on the Office for Students program then? The Uni
no, I
Connect
wasn't
program?
actually.
Was it something
No,
different? Oh, because it
no, I don't
sounds
know much
almost
about that one
identical to Uni
actually.
Connect. Oh, okay. It's
No, I
interesting.
worked
I mean, this.
directly for a couple of universities, so it was kind of an internal outreach. Um,
Oh, I got it. Yeah. So folks, if you've not heard of in fact, this is relevant if you're listening and you're an educator. The Uni Connect scheme is an Office for Students funded program to try and do exactly what I've just said Amelia does. But universities also kind of have their own outreach, like the University of East Anglia does. So, what university were you based at?
So I started off working at the university that I went to, which was Sheffield, and that was more of a recruitment role. And then I worked for Selwyn College in Cambridge and
Oh,
ran
okay.
some of their
Mm,
outreach programs. So I did things like summer schools and going around to, we had a specific link area that we worked with. So I'd work with schools in that area. Um,
okay.
and we did all sorts of things really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So universities and colleges have that kind of outreach by themselves, but I guess, and then the kind of something like the Office for Students Uni Connect program came along, and I think a lot of universities absorbed into that. So sound like what you were doing was already in place before that all came along. So, okay. I thought I thought maybe we had a past connection because when I used to work for that program. So finishing off Amelia's bio then. When she's not stuck behind a computer screen, she can be found swimming at her local outdoor pool, no matter if it's rain or shine, finding a bargain in a charity shop or a nice long walk, or trying and probably failing at a new art or craft. Ah, so tell us what are you quote unquote in your own words failing at the moment?
Well, I did some pottery painting at the weekend, which was actually didn't feel too much of a failure compared to usual. Though it was very time pressured, which I definitely struggle with. Like to have a nice long afternoon or something to do it, and we only had a couple of hours, so that was a bit more difficult. And I'm going to try and do some actual pottery making on a wheel at some point too. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Oh, I know. So you've got Yeah, I'm just thinking this it's actually quite a trope I've seen in some movies and TV where like they're trying to master a skill, and it tends to be like the pottery. I mean, also you've got the classic movie like what was it with Patrick Swayze and Demi? What was it?
Ghost.
Ghosts. That was it. Yeah. So that everyone remembers that scene. Whenever you think of like pottery on a turntable, like and they're our age, like Patrick Swayze. I was like, but no, I mean, there's so many tropes of it. I mean, it looks really difficult though, but surely it's all about the stability in your hands and how fast you turn the wheel. But I don't know. I haven't even tried it myself, so.
Yeah, I've got no idea. I'll let you know how it goes because I wouldn't say I
Yes,
have the
please.
most stable hands, but it is nice to do more things with your hands because we're already sat on a laptop, and I
Yes,
think
it's
doing
true.
something like that feels like something a bit different and a bit of a
Oh,
break from that, which is nice.
I've got it. So you should be written into our contracts, right? Something. So flexible working, but also things like to prevent like repetitive strain injury, pottery classes for all staff. There you go. Get those
There you go.
fingers mobile and
Sounds like a
exercising,
great
which is not just
well-being initiative.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, folks, you heard it here first. Get yourself a pottery class embedded at work. So, we're here in the virtual coffee and geography coffee house. I mean, so what do you usually when you go into a coffee house or a bistro or something like that? What is it you usually order?
I'm
What's
quite
your tea or
basic.
coffee
I
or drink?
usually go for a cappuccino.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Any
about it.
any
And a nice slice
particular
of
kind of
cake if
brand?
there's nice cake there.
Yeah. I do like a bit of a cake. So, is that what you're drinking right now? A bit of a cappuccino? Have you got something else with you at the moment?
I'm actually not. I've got a rooibos tea.
Yeah, rhubarb,
Um, rhubarb.
red bush.
Yeah, red bush. That's probably easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I was feeling a bit jittery and a bit nervous before we started recording, so I thought I've
Oh,
had my coffee for the day. I'll stick to a decaf tea.
oh, bless. Yeah, yeah. I say to everybody, folks, that if things go wrong, it's always the host's fault. It's never the guest's fault. So, yeah. So, okay. So we've told you've given us a hint a little bit about kind of like how you moved around, so Sheffield and Cambridge, and you're based now in Central Bedfordshire.
Yeah, so I
So
work for Central Bedfordshire Council. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So for folks, if you're not quite sure where that is, if you kind of like imagine a picture of the UK or England in your head, it's kind of it's it would you would think it'd be considered Midlands almost because it's in kind of like that middle south area of the UK, just kind of like the north and the west of London. But actually, Bedfordshire is counted as part of east of England, so the bit that sticks out to the east there. So the question I always like to ask people, Amelia, is with you as a person and your identity, what is it in terms of where you've been, where you've lived, where you've experienced, kind of how has that formed like Amelia of today? So like, were you always from this area and you went to Sheffield and you came back, or you from Sheffield? And so kind of like, what's been your kind of like geographical story, and how does it form the Amelia of today?
That's a really interesting question. I think my geographical story feels a bit confused at at the moment because I've recently moved back to Sheffield. So when I started working in the area, I lived in Cambridge. So I've never lived in Central Bedfordshire, which has been quite
Oh,
interesting to try and kind of work it out as a place and find out quite a lot about it, and hopefully bring a bit of a different take to people that have lived, known, and grown up there. So I grew up just outside of London, in a kind of average-sized town, and then went to Sheffield University, moved to Cambridge after that, for a job, and then have just moved back to Sheffield. So it feels like I'm kind of split between a few different places, I guess, at the moment, which is fun, and quite interesting.
wow. So that is such an indication, isn't it, of kind of the way we work nowadays, isn't it? The fact that you kind of like work for Central Bedfordshire Council, but you're living in Sheffield. So, I mean, how often do you get to come down to work? I mean, that must be what, a 3 hour drive or a 3.5 hour journey,
Not
surely.
quite that long, thankfully, and the train connection is pretty decent as well, so it'll take about 2.5
Okay.
hours. And I try and kind of fit in as much as I can whenever I come down, so I'm kind of in the area. Ends up being a really long day, but it's nice because I get to see colleagues and kind of go around the area and do site visits and things. So I'd come down and say kind of 1 to 2 times a month at the moment. But you're
Okay.
right. There's so much kind of working from home is so ingrained in the culture now, that doesn't feel like I'm doing anything awful or anything. So
Yeah. No, I mean, it's becoming increasingly a common thing when I've spoken to people on the podcast. I mean, I started this podcast more or less as a hangover from COVID, really, where we're all doing stuff online and remotely. And it's really interesting that things haven't quite like reset back to the way they were before COVID. And like, so one of my other climate ambassadors is actually works for the University of Leicester, but she lives in Cambridge, but she's actually going to be moving down to London, for example. So, and there's been so many people. And then we've got one of our climate action advisors for Let's Go Zero, Luciana. She's kind of like the climate action advisor for kind of like the kind of like Cambridge, West Norfolk kind of area, and all that kind of Suffolk. And she's like, and so she's moving down to London as well. In fact, the southern end of London, but she's continuing to be able to work. So yeah, it's such a normal thing. Is that unique where you are? I mean, are you probably much the person who lives the furthest away from with your colleagues, or is there other people in the office? I mean, you don't have to name names, but is it actually becoming a more common thing, do you think?
I think at the moment I probably am the furthest, at least in my team. I don't think I am in the whole council. I think there are people that kind of live all over, but within my team I'm probably the furthest. But there are people that don't live in the area. Central Bedfordshire is quite an interesting area because it's kind of this rural strip in between Luton and Milton Keynes and Bedford. So there are quite a few people that live in those kind of larger populations. So technically they're not in the area, but they're very close by.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why, Amelia, but I haven't. It's very rare I actually share a map. You'd think in a podcast called Coffee and Geography, I'd share a map more often. But so yes, so to give you an idea. So that is that the council offices there.
That is indeed
Yeah, it looks like quite a nice little area actually. It's very, as you say, yeah, it's very rural. And there's your
very
there's your council
rural.
offices right there. Very interesting
It's very
building.
green. So there's quite a nice, it's kind of got 3 pillars, I guess, or wings. And then there's quite a nice Campton plantation just next to it is a nice woodland that you can go for a lunchtime walk. We hosted a wellbeing walk in there for the Sustainability Network last year, which went down really well. So it's interesting. From a sustainability point of view, can be quite difficult to get to on public transport, but
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, but oh yeah, Campton Plantation. Yeah, and you got solar panels on your building as well. Quite a fair few of those.
yeah.
That's lovely. But yeah, so folks, so if if you're listening to us and not watching, then so yeah, we just described the building there. It's in a lovely. I love the Chicksands. What a lovely name for a village. Just outside of Shefford. Yeah, so in the Central Beds, and then when I've zoomed out, you can see that, as Amelia said, it's about 2.5 hours if you were to drive, and Sheffield is kind of up there. So yeah, okay. So are you? So would you say that is there any part of you then in your identity where you're kind of like, oh, I'm so because I've talked to some people from Sheffield, and one of my ex-students down here in Norfolk now lives in Sheffield, having gone to university there, and she said that she has taken some Norfolk up with her to Sheffield, but she really feels like part of the Sheffield culture now. I mean, is there anything? Do you feel more embedded with the culture of Sheffield and up there, and then the West Yorkshire, or is there anything from down south in London that you've taken up with you? Did anyone make fun of you for from being down south or anything like that?
No, everyone's really friendly up here, which I think is one of the main pulls. And same with being near the Peak District is really lovely as someone who quite likes going outdoors and going for walks on the weekend and things. So I do feel quite embedded here now, but it's always a bit strange, isn't it, when you move to a new city, especially when you're quite young. But I quite enjoy working in a different area to where I live, because it's such a different place, and I think it makes you consider different things in your work. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's just, you're not the only person also who said like this kind of almost, I wouldn't say north-south divide, but kind of almost like the etiquette and the way that people kind of like converse and talk to each other. As like, I just get this common theme that people are more outwardly polite in the north, you know. I don't know what it is. It's not that we're rude down here in the south, but that's like a common thing that people have told me. It's like, yeah, up north, it's like people are willing to talk to you more, and whereas down in the south, like people like keep more to themselves. So not necessarily rudeness, but I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
yeah,
You're about like the 8th or 9th person who said the same thing independently. So it's really
really,
interesting.
yeah. I did have some friends visiting from London at the weekend. So they all live kind of all over London now, but they were all saying like, "Wow, everyone's so friendly up here," and yeah, I don't know what it is.
Something in the water. Must be the tea that they drink or something. I don't know. But
Good old Yorkshire tea.
so Yorkshire tea, yeah, I do. That's my brand of choice, because I just like, I like how, my favorite thing about Yorkshire tea, we'll give them a bit of shout out. I can still say they should sponsor this podcast. I've given them a shout out so much. It's like, I love the way they shut down trolls on social media. So it's so good. It's so good, and the way they use humor. So like, they shut down this person who, very quick tangent here. So folks, there was this, it was very shortly after Brexit or something like that, and there was this person saying, oh, so good we're getting out Europe, blah blah, I'm always British, I always buy, I get British Yorkshire tea and all this kind of stuff, and he tagged Yorkshire tea in the tweet, right? So then whoever was the comms officer for Yorkshire Tea replied saying, "Hi, thanks for so much for, did you know that our blends of our tea is blended from all over the world, and from India?" It was like blah blah blah. And this guy was like, "Nah, you're kidding. You're just trying to wind me up." It says, "No, here's our webpage of where all our blends come from." It's like, and like completely trolling him and stuff like that. It was like, "Oh, I'm never going to buy Yorkshire tea again. I thought you were British." I was like, and he said, and I think they said something like, "That's fine. We like our customers not be bigots," or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
So
good. I've never seen their social media
yeah, they're great.
channels before, but it's
They're good for
always
a
good
laugh.
when there's a
They're
bit
good
of
for a laugh.
personality behind it, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So before we move on to talk about climate ambassadors and your work, I think it would be a missed opportunity for me, as someone who knows a lot of geography and science educators, listens to this podcast, about talking about tree planting in the tropics, which is something you did at university. Now I know that for both of us, like, university's quite a while ago, but yeah, was there any particular thing that you thought, oh, I find this really really interesting, and planting trees, the tropics? Yeah, just any comment on that at all? That, I mean, from what you can remember.
Yeah, of course. So I think it kind of came about because I'd seen so many campaigns online, especially around that time. It was probably around kind of 2020, 2021, where there were lots of kind of websites saying, if you spend X amount more, then we will plant a tree for you, or if you use our kind of search engine, then we'll be planting trees because of that. Or even things like offsetting flights and saying we'll offset your carbon
Ah,
through
yeah,
planting
yeah.
trees. And there was all of this kind of going on, and I was very interested as to how that actually worked in practice, because to me I couldn't see how it went from you pay them a fiver and trees get planted in the
Mm.
ground, and where are they being planted and what's happening. So I found it all very interesting and wanted to answer that question. And it turned out through kind of initial research that even if it was a company based in the UK, it doesn't mean that they're planting trees here in the UK. Often they would be buying a patch of land from a subsistence farmer in, a
Interesting.
completely different country across the world, and planting trees there. So obviously there's a huge kind of ethical question about taking land away from people that might need it for food and growing and their kind of livelihood and economy. And also, once the trees are in the ground, what's happening to them? Who's looking after them? Who's responsible for that? And are they actually growing to maturity and then becoming a tree that will store carbon, if that makes sense? So I found that all very interesting, and that's why I decided to look into it. And I think the answer that I found, I don't know whether there's been any more. Yeah, I'm sure there's been a lot of people look into this since, but the answer at the time was no one really knows, and it really depends on the scheme, and you can't tell from what they say on the tin actually what happens to those trees, and what, even if they're planting the right type of tree for the place. And I think, the worst thing that I found was there were examples where companies were cutting down woodland that was pre-existing, and then planting trees back in there, where obviously what would have been so much better was to keep those trees that had been alive for 50 years. So yeah, it was quite quite sad in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, yeah. That reminded me of a few years ago. I wrote an article. I was hoping for it to be published into some student-facing magazines, but like A Level or something like that. But it was a really weird thing where the A Level publishers were like, "This is not enough for A Level," and the GCSE publishers were saying it's too much for GCSE. It's like, I don't know how that works, but anyway, I'm not an editor, so but I got it published on Tutor to You, and this is exactly the kind of thing like I mentioned. I was talking about the fact that this kind of like westernized colonial way of conservation is actually really harmful and does more harm than good, and so I was talking about, the fact that we have this kind of and I kind of tried to just showing it on the screen, folks. I kind of like did a bit of a thought experiment, like mind mapping of about what the difference between almost like sustainability from an indigenous pre-colonial, point of view is compared to the way we see sustainability today in a very westernized colonial way. So like, for example, on the left-hand side where I've got like pre-colonial, pre-industrialization sustainability, like the environment bubble, if you imagine 3 bubbles overlapping. The environment bubble is the biggest, because if you don't look after the environment, everything else falls to pieces. And like the social bubble is the next biggest, and the economic is the smallest one, because it wasn't really much of a not so much of an issue. It wasn't much of a component, because trade was more mutual, trade was more collaborative, and it was to support each other's communities. It wasn't for economic gain, right? Whereas on the right hand side, I've got westernized style sustainability, where the economic bubble is supposed to be the biggest, and you're trying to have this balance between all 3: economic, social, and environmental. But they're competing with each other almost, and like the only thing which seems to overlap the 3 of them is ecotourism, which is really hardly any beneficial at all. So and I went on to talk about the difference between fortress conservation, which sounds a little bit like maybe what was going on with some of these tree planting schemes. They turned it into almost fortress conservation, where they kind of like just taken over some land to do what you've just described, maybe in some cases. And then you've got rights-based conservation, which actually works with the indigenous population and gives them control of what's taking place. So yeah, it was a really interesting article to read. So what you just described, right, really reminded me of kind of the research I did for that article. So folks, I'll put the link in the description for that I wrote a few years ago, and yeah, that was really interesting to do. So moving on to kind of like, so obviously you've got that passion for the environment and kind of wanted to do well by environmental stewardship and empowering people to kind of like do that. So that's led you to eventually your current role at Central Bedfordshire Council as Sustainability Officer. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, would you say that your role in Central Bedfordshire Council, or would you opine that maybe that this is kind of like a recent phenomena that councils are starting to have sustainability officers, or do you feel that actually these are things that have been around for a while that maybe we just haven't realized until now, because now sustainability is a really key thing? So I don't know if you have any opinion or any insight to that, because I don't know. I don't know whether a sustainability officer is always been a thing at a council, whether it's a relatively new thing, or even if you're the first ever sustainability officer at Central Beds. I don't know.
That would be cool, wouldn't it? No, I'm definitely not the
Would.
first, but I'm not very far off the first either, I don't think. So
Right.
I think it's probably existed in different capacities before, and there's obviously been some element of sustainability in lots of people's roles across the council, but having a dedicated sustainability team, I think I would say, is within the past 5 to 7 years or so. It seemed to
Interesting.
align
Yeah.
quite interestingly with kind of when I was leaving university and looking for jobs and things. And I know that from our council, at least, it was 2019 or 2020, I want to say, that was when they kind of really started to look into this, and a sustainability plan was developed, and that was really embedded into what the council does. But obviously, every council does everything at a slightly different rate depending on their size and their capacity, and what their
Budgets and that
members
stuff.
want to see. So, you know, thankfully our members are really interested in sustainability and really want to see their local environment thrive, and kind of build that into what it means to be from Central Bedfordshire, I think. So that makes it really helpful in our jobs and what we do to make things happen. So I think it's always been there bubbling away in the background, as you say, but actually having dedicated roles for it is fairly new.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, yeah, maybe in the past there were things like, I don't know, efficiency officer or something like that, but it's kind of like naturally evolved into sustainability to incorporate more than just kind of like almost the economic and maybe the human resources side of thing, which I think is, there's nothing but a positive move, because you have to consider all those aspects, and I like the model of the Sustainable Development Goals wedding cake, where you've got the whole base of the wedding cake is the environment and everything to do with the land and the sea, and because without that base, everything else on top, so the environment, social, economic, sustainable development goals doesn't work, because it just all falls off. So I kind of like, I'm really, it's very heartening to hear that more and more councils, at least from my point of view, seem to be appointing people like yourself and a team like yourself. And that's the other thing as well. I've noticed that a lot of councils are not just appointing just one single person now, but they do have like a sustainability team. I've seen that word a lot. I mean, not in every council, but certainly I see it's increasing things. So I usually wait till the very end for people to give shout outs, but I guess while we're talking about a sustainability team, is there anyone do you want to give a shout out to your team? So who have you got there at Central Beds you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, no, that'd be lovely. So my kind of very immediate team, because otherwise I might be listing off for
Yeah, all
ages,
day.
is Sarah, Ruth, Rhiannon, and Monica. So they're all kind of really involved in lots of different parts, and I think it's really important to have a team that's working on this, because ultimately
Yeah.
the goal is to have everyone in the council thinking about this in their day-to-day role, because it's not something that we can't completely, stop climate change by ourselves. We need everyone to be involved and everyone to be working towards the goal, because not everything is within our capacity. So having a few different touch points across the council is really useful too. But yeah, my direct team are lovely, and it's quite nice to have a bit of a girl power team as well.
Yes. Yeah, I spoke to Ruth the other day, because Ruth is also interested in becoming a climate ambassador, so we're just trying to get her sorted out. So it's lovely that two of your core team that you work with are yourself and Ruth to be your climate ambassadors as well. So that leads us quite nicely on to the next bit. Is it wasn't a hard sell for you to become a climate ambassador, and I made a mistake when I saw you in University of Bedfordshire Climate Summit event. I was like, oh yeah, Amelia, you need to become a climate. Like, it, I've done it, I'm trained. It was like, I'm like, oops, because I kind of like completely lost track, and because I was like, oh, you're so good at this, you're really well placed. You're like, yeah, no, I'm already a climate ambassador. So I didn't even need to convince you, because you were there. So from a Central Beds point of view, then obviously climate ambassadors is when you specifically work with education settings and schools. So from your point of view, obviously that will be not exclusively, but almost exclusively will be the education settings in Central Bed. So for so folks, if you're in Central Bedfordshire, listen very carefully to this, because this is Amelia's now going to say how her and her team can support you with climate action, stuff like that. But if you're not in Central Beds, folks, this is a really good thing to listen to, because it would be so good if we had at least one person from every district council who was a climate ambassador who can do this stuff to support their schools. So yeah, so Amelia, what kind of stuff do you and Ruth, when she gets on board, are you doing through the council, which is related to climate ambassadors? How are you supporting schools? How are you supporting them with things like their climate action plans and whatnot?
Well, I just don't know where to start. There's so much going on at the moment, which is
you're doing so much, yeah.
And not just us. I mean, there's so many different charities and things like Let's Go Zero, and I know there's the sister projects from climate ambassadors as well. That at the moment it kind of feels like getting a hold on everything that's out there and trying to funnel it down to give to people, which is really, really exciting. And I can see why there must be. Hopefully, it means that there's lots of climate ambassadors that you're not forgetting who's who. So yeah, I think at the moment, in terms of what we do as a council, so it's part of our role to work with schools and work in that kind of climate education capacity. So climate ambassadors links up so nicely. We do a lot of different things, from kind of one-to-one support with schools, helping them around the Eco Schools initiative is a really big part of what we do. So we have the goal of having 100 schools to register and get their green flag from Eco Schools by 2030. So we're kind of slowly chipping away at that and trying to get more schools involved in running their own environmental initiatives. We have a green box, which schools and educators can loan out from the councils. We have them in a couple of different libraries across the council area, and they have loads of really fun kind of quite classic games like snakes and ladders and things, but with environmental twists. So say you've got a scout group or a or Girl Guides or something, you can use them with your group and teach with the kind of hands-on resources, and there's loads of lovely books in there as well. We're currently setting up a sustainable student program as well, which is going to be for year 10 to 12 students in Central Bedfordshire. So that will be kind of almost a year-long program for them to learn about sustainability, get green skills for thinking ahead towards the future for apprenticeships or applying to university. So that's really exciting, and that will be kind of coming out soon. And then what else? There's lots. We also run a kind of teacher eco forum as well. So that's for teaching staff to kind of get together and share ideas for how they run their eco club, and we focus on specific eco schools topic areas. So those are really nice opportunities for kind of everyone to get together and learn from each other and kind of share ideas of how they implement different things in their school.
Wow.
Yeah, and then there's all the tree planting stuff as well.
Yes, yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, which you're really you're keen on and stuff like that. And the thing I love about eco schools is that it's something that people have been familiar with here in the UK for a long time, because eco schools have been around for decades now. And so folks, if you're listening to this in your education sense, like, well, why do I need to do this Department for Education, climate action plan, stuff like that? We already have eco schools. That's actually great. That's great because you don't really have to do anything extra. You can build in all of the stuff that you've done for eco schools into your climate action plan. In fact, you don't have much work to do at all, because when you write a climate action plan, you can embed a lot of that stuff from eco schools. So it's really good. So as Amelia's just been talking about, yeah, you mentioned the tree planting stuff. So I've found it on your website, on your Central Bedfordshire website, from free trees to reporting problem with trees. Everything you need to know is here. So yeah, you've got such a great thing. So creating woodlands. What's a tiny forest then? I mean, I know what a tiny forest is, but what's a tiny forest then?
Yeah, no, they're really lovely projects. So we're working with a delivery partner called Earthwatch, who's a charitable organisation that do lots of different things, but one of them is tiny forests, and they're essentially kind of very small areas of woodland. It's a little bit of a citizen science project, so they follow the Miyawaki method of forest management, and there's a variety, kind of a mixture of native trees from your kind of shrubs right up to your oaks in there, and they're planted quite closely together, with quite a lot of soil prep before any trees planted as well. But they're really great projects to get local schools involved, and yeah, so like this one at Brooklands Middle, this was a bit before my time, but as you can see, lots of
Yeah.
people there that have everyone's planted a tree, and then they can use that space going forward as well. So they put benches in for forest schools to use, and for children to get out in nature and do things like bug surveys and measuring trees and things like that. So yeah, they're really nice resources
There's
for
photos.
schools and communities, I think, especially where they might not have access to green space, because Central Bedfordshire is quite an
Right.
interesting area. There's loads of really lovely, parks and recreational spaces, but there's also quite a lot of areas where it kind of looks like there's lots of green space, but it might be, a farmland, or it might be not accessible to the public. So it's quite nice to have these kind of places that children can really go in and adults can really go in and use and learn from.
It's so good. Yeah, it's so good. And yeah, it just goes to show, doesn't it? It doesn't need to be like big, massive grandeur schemes and things. It could be these, which is why I really hooked onto the word tiny, and and micro, forests and stuff like that. It's because yeah, folks, it's one of the things is that we have issues with, of course, is there are plenty of schools out there which don't have space, that don't have much green space, or in completely urban areas. But this is just one example of how you can manage that, just like having a little patch here. I'm guessing, Amelia, this one is in Brooklands Middle is well, you're pretty much seeing almost the whole thing on the screen, I guess. It's not that's what how big it is really.
Yeah, so they're about the size of a tennis court. So they're kind of
Okay.
I think sometimes it depends on the shape. Sometimes I think, oh, that's
Yeah.
kind of smaller than I was expecting, and some of them look really big. So yeah, but it's
Yeah.
probably
Got
about
kids scales
that
there, yeah.
shape and
Yeah, that makes
size.
sense. Yeah, looks about right. Looking at, I had a classic kids like that one with it's the thing in his mouth, the bulb in his mouth. Oh, kids, gotta love them. Gotta love them. Yeah, so that's an amazing scheme. I really love that. And as you can see, folks, so if you're looking on screen, so let me just list out where you've got. So it says you're working in partnership with Earthwatch, who successfully planted 4,200 trees across 4 new tiny forests. And listen to this, right? So you've got Cranfield University, so it's great that the local universities getting involved. Brooklands Middle School, Caldco Church of England Academy, right? And you've got a couple of recreational grounds, cemetery, well, 3 recreation. So, folks, look, their schools can get involved in this. Okay, so if you're out there and you're thinking and you're in Central Beds, get in contact with Central Beds and Amelia, right? And be great. I guess that comes to you and your team, does it, Amelia? Be green at centralbedfordshire.gov.uk.
Yeah, that's right. And that's actually given me a reminder that I need to update that page too, because we've had 3 more go in since the beginning of
Oh,
January,
amazing.
at 3 schools, and then we've got a couple more coming up as well. Not in schools. One's at Whipsnade Zoo, and the other is at a recreation ground in our area. So yeah, it's
That's
very
amazing.
exciting.
Yeah, oh, that's great. And then that quite nicely writes straight into their school's climate action plan. So they say, right, that's excellent, because this is biodiversity, clearly, because you're improving biodiversity, but it's also adaptation and resilience, because you're creating areas where you're protecting the school land, you're producing shade, and it will help with runoff and water and stuff like that. And then they can use it as for the curriculum as well, learning about the outdoors, use it for biology. Your focus that you had, biology and the different looking at biodiversity, stuff like that. So, and you could say also decarbonisation, because as those trees are growing, it's taking in carbon emissions as well. So that's a fantastic scheme which can tick all, something on all 4 pillars of the climate action plan. Oh, that's great. Thank you for showing that. And yeah, sorry for putting you in the spot, not trying to get you to list everything that you're doing, but I mean, that's just one
No.
example. I know of very many. So what I'll do, I'll put these links in the chat, and if Amelia's got any other links, folks, that she didn't get around to or couldn't think of on the spot, not to worry. We'll make sure that we get some bits and bobs in the description, because that's absolutely fantastic. Right. I'm going to ask a listener question now, Amelia. So we're going to do Jog Q over a brew. And our question this week comes from Geography Gem, a member of the Geography Teacher community, confluence of geographers, as we call ourselves. And on Blue Sky, she said this. She wanted to ask you this question: what's the biggest challenges, do you think, in implementing sustainability for a local authority, but also the biggest opportunities? So yeah, it's a classic question, really. What's your biggest challenge and your biggest opportunity?
Okay, that's a really interesting question, and
Ooh.
quite difficult to pick out one thing, I think.
Again,
I'd
there's
say,
probably many. Yeah.
yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges, as you can kind of imagine in the current climate, is budgets. So a lot of the things that I've
Yeah.
just described, either we have external funding for, or we're kind of doing just with officer time. So like the new sustainable student program, we have no funding for. It's just me myself and I kind of and asking for volunteers to help run that.
Yeah.
So I think that is obviously a huge challenge. And also probably that as a local authority, I definitely didn't appreciate until I worked in one how much is going on, how many different things we're trying to do, and often quite kind of quite very challenging, very important things for our local community that need to be done and need to be done now. Whereas obviously sustainability is looking towards the future.
Yes. Yeah.
And it can be very difficult to kind of align those two things, understandably. So that's probably another big challenge. But on the more positive side, I think there are lots of opportunities to grow and encourage sustainability, especially around working with kind of local community groups and amplifying their voices and kind of linking people up as well. People often come to local authorities with questions and concerns, and being able to put different people in touch and point everyone in the right direction for what they want to do can really help that kind of collaborative working and getting lots of different people involved from different sectors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've noticed that some of the really good councils are really, really good at doing that. They're really good at like saying, yeah, no, we can't do this alone, and we are meant to be, a kind of almost like a touch point for the whole community to kind of band together and these kind of things. And I think, which is one reason why we, things like climate buses are so good, because it kind of can support that. And I know that some councils, you've kind of thought about the same yourself. We have connected climate ambassadors together. So we've got the wonderful Andrew McKay. I mean, he's in Luton, but we've partnered up with him to kind of like help some certain bits push forward. So we're always like Paul Edmund, for example. So we do like to kind of like try to collaborate, don't we? And what I like about is quite often like you're seeing you CC'd in an email or CCing someone else, like we're trying to kind of pull these strings, see if we can collaborate together. And I just think that's such a great way of working. And one of the reasons why I love working in this job so much is kind of like I feel the collaboration just makes me feel so connected to other people and what we're trying to achieve. And it's really interesting to hear that that's something that a council can really facilitate or has the ability to do, because as you say, there are so many facets and so many responsibilities that a council has. A district council, I'd say, because a county council, they're big and grandeur, but they have like those big operational things and things like that. And then you've got the parish councils, but they're very, very focused to their locales and stuff like that. But the district councils, oh crikey, they've got to pull things from the top, they've got to help support from the bottom, and they've got it must.
Yeah.
I don't think they get enough credit, district councils, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you're right with talking about working with, you know, colleagues in Luton and Bedford and all the local areas as well, because people, you know, people that live in those areas, they don't think, oh, this is for Luton or this is Central Bedfordshire. They just want something to happen, and so being able to
Right.
work as in a collaborative way can help that, I think, and help
Yeah.
make change and pull everyone together.
That's so great. Thank you very much, Jem, for that question. That was really great to get those insights off Amelia. It's a common question, but it's one which there's no real definitive answer. The answer seems to be, I mean, budget always seems to be quite common for the challenges, and then like I really enjoy the opportunities as much, which can almost sometimes in some respects overcome the challenge. So like, you know, if you get a collaborative and you get some volunteers in, you can kind of help with budgets and stuff like that because people are volunteering. So bits like that. Right, one last thing to do before we finish off, Amelia, is I want you to spill the beans, please. So I'm spilling the beans, right? And you're going to spill the beans, and that's this, right? The first thing that you thought about spilling the beans is that you have a love for films, right? So you got into a film recently thanks to an amazing local independent cinema. So, and you talk about how you love films, especially when it involves beautiful locations and using nature. So you must kind of like love things like Planet Earth and stuff like that as well. True crime podcast as well. You also say you like.
No, as I was writing it, I was thinking, what is something that's completely different to geography and not related to anything? And I was like, but film kind of is. So maybe true crime
Yeah.
podcast is a better answer, because I also love a true crime podcast.
But I want to know about this local independent thing. So you got into film because of a local independent cinema. So tell us about this local. Go on, let's give them a shout out. This local independent cinema. Then.
Yeah, of course. So it's the Showroom in Sheffield, and it's just a lovely cinema. And it's completely independent, and they put on loads of different interesting films and documentaries as well. So I went to one about the miners' strike recently that was really interesting and quite kind of local to our area. And yeah, I just think I've got over the fear of going to the cinema alone, and actually going to the cinema alone is great. I think.
Yeah, we really do need to support our local cinemas now. We've got Cinema City in Norwich, which is our kind of like, you know, local independent one. And we've also got we've got really good like theatres as well, local, like the Madder Market Theatre and stuff like that. They sometimes do showings there. So yeah, I mean, so the showroom workstation in Sheffield. So yeah, and so it's just cycling through the kind of Black Bag, which is a gripping drama stage on screen. Yeah, and so. But they do put some of the old classics on. I've just noted it. There you go. So they're showing Blade as a midnight. I guess Midnight Marauders means like a midnight showing of a movie or something like that. So Blade, one of my favourite movies growing up. They're going to be showing Age on
So
screen. So they've
it's
got
quite a
David
nice
Tennant Macbeth.
it's quite a nice community space as well, because they have a cafe that is quite a good kind of alternative work from home location. So you can
I've even got a link
work.
saying remote working at the showroom.
Yeah, so
They're
being
promoting that.
someone that works from home quite a lot, it's quite a nice kind of additional space to go to, and it's always very calm in there, and you go
This is
watch
so
film after
cool.
work. It's really lovely.
Yeah. So get this, folks. I've never seen this before. This is so interesting. You know, our remote working offer for just £8 a day. You can make the most of unlimited hot and soft drinks, reliable Wi-Fi, and ample power and USB. So what a deal! That's quite incredible for £8. Yeah,
Yeah, get a lot of
it's got a little
coffees.
caveat in terms of I can imagine. Yeah, you could definitely. I would definitely drink my weight in tea and coffee. And if I was to pay for every single one, it'd be way more than £8. But that's such a great idea. Oh, well done, showroom in Sheffield. I think maybe if anybody's listening to that to similar places, maybe Cinema City in Norwich, I think you've got something you can magpie there. Right. Okay, thanks for that, Amelia. That's fantastic. Right, let's finish off finally then with We Are All Geographers. That's when we kind of link all of our guests together. So a couple of weeks ago, because we took a mini break last week with Alistair, but a couple of weeks ago we spoke to the wonderful Peter Liffey, who's a Scot who now lives down here in the east in Felixstowe. And so when I asked him when he finished his 30 seconds, I asked him for a word to come up for you, Amelia, but he didn't know who you were or who the future guest was. The word that he would like you to have a go at for 30 seconds is the word boundaries, which is could be an easy one for someone who works in a district council. I don't know, but but you can take that word boundaries however you so like. It could be based on something we've discussed in the chat. It could be based on your work or whatever. But as soon as you're ready, I will start the 30-second timer. So whenever you're ready, the word is boundaries.
Okay, so just anything, doesn't have to be related to
Just
what we've
riff.
spoken about, or okay. Oh,
Yep.
okay, I think I'm ready.
Right, here we go.
Okay, I'm going to start this off with a bit of a cop out in that I don't think I'm very good at establishing boundaries, especially in a working environment. I think I say yes to everything, and maybe after today I could go away and have a bit more of a think about establishing boundaries at work, because part of this role is that it's so complex and I'd love to do everything, and there isn't always the time or opportunity to, unfortunately. But boundaries are very important in work and at home as well, and thank God the time has gone off.
Oh, I really like that. I'd like that take, because you'd think, well, classic, if we're talking about geography, you're talking like council boundaries or the boundaries between physical boundaries, rivers being. But I'm like, no,
I didn't think about that.
No. I love the way that you took it, because that's what's so great about doing this podcast, is that I love everybody's take, and sometimes those personal ones, things to do with the way that we operate as human beings and things like that, and like metaphorical boundaries, abstract boundaries, or something like that. Sometimes I don't think people approach the 30-second words that often. Usually they're quite literal. So I really like that you took that approach. So yeah, no, don't apologize. I'm really, really pleased. So thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I'm the same. I used to be a yes person all the time, and then until it was a teaching assistant who came into my classroom looking really angry with me, had a face of fun, and she went like this: "I want a word with you, Kit." And I said, "Oh no, what have I done now?" I was like, "What have I done now?" "You need to say no more often. I can tell you're shattered and you're tired, and you keep saying yes to people. It's like, you need to slow down and you need to say no. If I hear you say yes one more time, unless it's to allow a kid to go to the toilet, I'm going to come in and give you another telling off." So I was like, yeah, bless her. That was Lynn Spencer, bless her. She was, what a lovely, lovely human being. I worked with all the TAs I worked with were amazing, but she said, "Kit, she was too polite to be that." I exaggerate. She was never that firm, but she was a lovely human being who really, really kind of gave me pause for thought. So yes, we all need to have our own boundaries, folks. And before I forget, Amelia, for whoever I talk to next time, what word would you like to come up with? It doesn't have to be anything. It could be completely random. It could be something you see, something we talk about. It doesn't matter. There's no rhyme or reason to the word you come up with.
Okay. Oh, this is difficult now. Trying to look around my living room for inspiration. I'd say, can we go with frogs?
Yes. We're gonna go with frogs. So
that's really
folks,
random.
Great, excellent. So in fact, the work that my potential next guest does, I think 30 seconds on frogs might not be enough for them.
Oh,
that's a bit of a hit. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry. Look, these are kind of the words I've had. So when we first started, it was quite, feminism, faith. Then we started having things like trampoline, and then it went back to abstract again, purpose, invasive, cryptic. Then we had someone who said toenail. that was Roe Proctor. They came up to, and it just got really round. And then Andy Plasties came up with anti-disestablishmentarianism. I was like, oh great.
Oh.
So someone said Doctor Who, and another person said tomato ketchup, and then it went back to consequential. So it's all random and all over the place. So
Okay.
so frog or frogs is completely within keeping of what we do.
Fab.
I
I look
mean,
forward
this
to
has been
listening
such
to
a
that.
lovely chat. Yeah, yes, listen out for that. This has been such a lovely chat, and thanks for coming on to the podcast and chat with us. So, and where can so people can obviously find you via the council. So that, let's see if I remember it. So you got bgreen at centralbedfordshire.gov.uk. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that will go to your whole team, and I believe so that will probably be the best way for people to get hold of you. And of course, folks, because Amelia is one of our climate ambassadors, if you feel that the Central Beds team, Amelia or Ruth or anybody, can lend you a hand, obviously you can contact myself as Amelia's regional hub manager for the Climate Ambassador scheme, and I can always put you in touch as well. So yeah. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the summer weather.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Coffee and Geography, folks. If you're itching to know more about the Climate Ambassadors' awesome work, visit www.climateambassadors.org. Don't forget to follow us on Blue Sky at geogramblings.com and use the CoffeeJogPod hashtag to stay in the loop. Submit your questions for our guests on LinkedIn or Blue Sky with hashtag #JogQoverABrew. Keep exploring this amazing world, tackling climate action and flexing your geography muscles. Stay curious, keep jogging, and keep making waves.